All right, this is the follow-up, and we are following up today on a live video I did on George's Space Chat in 2020 last year. The live video was entitled, actually, we're following up on two live videos. One featured the album Baduizm Live, and the other one featured the bass player of that album, Hubert Eaves the Fourth. My guest today on the follow-up is none other but the mighty, there is no one bigger than the king. Booker King is in the house. Booker, thank you so much for making yourself available and welcome to the follow up.
My pleasure being here. Glad to
Awesome.
see you. Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. So I'm so glad. So for those listening, for those watching, let me give you some background as to why I thought Booker is a fantastic guest on the follow-up today, especially when it comes to Baduizm Live. Baduizm Live was a live album that Erykah Badu put out towards the end of the, or middle towards the end of the 90s, and that I, in my opinion, put on the same in the same category as some iconic live albums in the R&B or in the music genre, I should say, like Aretha live at Fillmore West, Donny Hathaway live at the Bitter End, the live album of Marvin Gaye, 1971 in Oakland. So Booker King is a bass player here in New York, and we're going to get to his background as well. But I wanted to get his perspective on what the scene was like, out of which the aesthetic for Baduizm came, out of which the aesthetic for the live album came. And as such, I thought that it would be, I'm of course honored to have him on the follow up, but it's just great to have someone to talk to who is still active, who was active back then. We don't have anyone active anymore from all the other live albums, but this one we can at least figure out. So Booker, let me turn it over to you. Maybe we should start by maybe give the audience a brief summary of your career. I know I'm asking for a lot, but just let them know who you are, basically.
Okay. I play electric and upright bass.
Yes.
Two things. I'm classically trained, studied with Richard Davis and Homer Mensch. Um, Played on a whole lot of things. Let's say I've done a bluegrass record and a Britney Spears tour and everything in between.
There you go. I mean,
Pretty much it.
that's a great way of putting it. That's awesome.
It's the absolute truth.
No, this is
Yeah.
perfect. This is absolutely perfect. And fast forwarding to the 90s, you are active here in New York City. You're
Mhm.
a Brooklyn. I believe you're born in Brooklyn. Is that correct?
No, I was born in
No,
Long Island. I was
no.
born in the Bronx,
Okay,
grew up in Long Island,
okay.
and I've lived in Brooklyn for longer than I've lived anyplace else.
Well, there you go. So you
Yeah.
are a Brooklynite for all
All
for
intents
all.
and purposes, yeah, purposes, I'm absolutely a Brooklynite. Yeah.
There you go. And you were active at the time when the album came out and
Oh,
before the
yes.
album came out. So
Well,
why don't you take us back to sort of what the scene was like at the time?
okay. Well, at that at the time when she started doing stuff, I was playing with Corey Glover,
Yeah.
and the album that we did at the time was Hymns, which is also a whole it's rock, but it's also got a lot of R&B in it and
Right.
funk and stuff like that. And that was kind of the atmosphere at the time, is that if you were playing for real,
Mm-hmm.
there was jazz in your music,
Yeah.
there was a heaping helping of R&B and funk in your music,
Yeah.
and everything was real.
Right.
There was, loops didn't weren't a part of that music as
Right.
much.
Right.
But when she started doing stuff, she was opening up for D'Angelo,
Mm. Okay.
and D'Angelo's MD at the time was Norman Hurt. We
Right.
call him Keys, right?
Keys. Yeah.
We call him Keys, and there was a period also in that time period that Keys was in Corey's band as well.
Oh,
We
geez,
had
I
two
know.
keyboard players. One was Albert Menendez, and the other one was Keys.
Right.
And Eaves was telling us Albert was it was really funny because Corey's record was just about to come out, and uh, Albert was doing side work with Shakira,
Wow.
and Keys was doing. Uh, D'Angelo had stopped doing stuff for a while. You know how his career goes, 10 years
Hmm.
between things.
Right.
So he had stopped doing, and he says, I'm going to be doing this side stuff with this singer, that's from Texas.
Right.
And we said, okay. And her record blew up so fast.
Mm. It did.
And there were also things like what's his name? Maxwell was in New York.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he had a band that also included friends of mine as well.
Right.
Like let me see, Jim Musson, Hod David, who still plays with him,
Right.
and Gary Foote at the time played with him a
Mm.
bunch, as
Wow.
well as Jonathan Marin. So, and that was Jonathan Marin also was Groove Collective. There's all of these things, like I said, that were a mishmash of jazz, funk, and R&B.
Right.
And it's the music that came out of that. And she wasn't from here, but boy, did she sound like here.
Oh yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. No, that's
She really sounded like here.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and the funny thing you say about the live record is, um, I was on tour with Corey, right? And we did this thing in Seattle for Sam Perkins, who was a basketball player with the Seattle Supersonics at the time. And we played early in the day. George Howard played early in the day, and a bunch of other people played early in the day. And at night, I'm seeing all of this film stuff, and I'm like going, they're taking video of us, but they're not filming us. So what
Right.
is it for?
Right.
And when Erica went on, the video for Tyrone was done at that concert.
Oh, check that out. So
Yeah,
you were there, like
well, I was there. I was standing out in the audience,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
watching that one.
Exactly.
I could walk around like other people couldn't walk around, so I could walk backstage and stuff like that.
Right. 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 Right.
But the first time I heard Tyrone, musicians listen to lyrics,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'll listen to the lyrics, and I'm like, going, "This is the funniest shit I ever heard."
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
This it was so real. It was
Mhm.
like it you could not make it up because it was so real, right? It's
But there was so much when they were playing. You had to note that it's three rhythm.
mm,
It was drums, bass, and keyboards,
yeah.
and three background vocals, right?
Right. Right.
And it sounded like 20 people.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly the point that I was trying to make in the live album, in the live video about the live album,
Mhm.
where I was like, I was on tour as well, although in Europe when I first heard the live album, and
Mhm.
I had never heard anything like it before because it sounded so full. And then you know, at the time you flip the CD around, you get to the credits, and it's a three-piece band and three
Yeah.
background singers and nothing else, right? And
And
not,
it's about, part of that is about chemistry,
yeah,
because, the drummer's Poogie Bell,
yeah,
the keyboard player is Keys,
yeah,
and Hubert is the bass player.
right,
It's like, that's a slouch free zone. It's like, you know, how bad or they're going to sound. It's like there is no ceiling to how good they can sound.
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure, for
And when
sure.
you looked at, and the background vocalists, the chemistry of them too, because they sounded like it was like a choir,
Yeah,
and
for
it was
sure.
three people.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible, and that was, I mean, that definitely caught my ear at the time, and I think I'm by far not the only one. I'm not alone in that because the success of the album speaks for itself, and the fact that we are sitting here today and we're still speaking about the album, right? There
Yeah,
was one thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Mainly because, as I already prefaced, like we don't have we don't have witnesses of that particular era anymore when we're
Mm,
talking about Aretha Franklin live at Fillmore West. You know, there might
yeah,
be every now and then, like on social media, you will find people who were like, I was there, I was at the concert, like this is for real, right?
yeah,
You will every now and then. Nevertheless, you know, people have moved on, and time moves on. We don't,
mm,
like, we've lost a lot of people who were in the bands, you know, of Donny Hathaway, of Aretha Franklin,
yeah,
like all of that, like. So there's no one really to talk to about a particular scene and a particular aesthetic at a particular time.
yeah.
Let me ask you this: like, what was the aesthetic? You already kind of mentioned that. Okay, there's a lot of jazz in this. There's a lot of rock. There's a lot of R&B. Perhaps give us some artists that all of you were influenced by, because I think that's
Mm.
an interesting and important bit of information right there.
What's really funny is that you mentioned them all. So you said Aretha,
Yeah,
Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway birthed,
yeah,
I don't know how many great, live albums because everybody wanted to recreate that kind of chemistry,
yeah, yeah.
you know. And speaking about that, I remember my aunt gave me the Donny Hathaway live album.
Right.
I wore out two vinyl copies of
Well,
it
yeah, yeah, yeah.
quickly.
This, yeah, I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it. Totally.
and the other record at that time that was done in another small venue at the time was Curtis Mayfield at the Bitter End, which is
Mm,
another incredible record.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's a deep one. That's
Mm.
very very often overlooked.
And it's more like, unlike Donnie, I think Curtis's comes off a little more like a singer-songwriter kind of
Mm,
thing.
mm,
It's just the songs are so incredible
yeah,
that you just go, oh my, and the playing is incredible too,
yeah, yeah,
because his band they were beasts as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
That's the other thing, is that a lot of these guys, their their bands, like if you look at, like Maxwell's first record,
Mm,
and you look at just the bass players on his record,
yeah,
you go like, wow. You look
yeah.
at just the drummers on the record, it's
Right.
wow.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
guys that, you know, the great thing about living in New York is that that was at a very fertile time in everything, because that was like early 90s to mid 90s. And that was when, like, you could see the Spin Doctors at Mondo Perso, Mondo Con. You
Right,
could see Joan Osborne at the same clubs,
right,
you know.
right.
It was amazing how many guys got signed in that short amount of time.
Yeah, yeah, for
You
sure,
know?
for sure.
And
Do you?
what we thought was, our local guys turn into international guys
There you go. There
in
you go.
short in short order.
Yeah, yeah, that is incredible. That is incredible. Do you think that that was particular to that time? Do you think that there are spurts of sort of this, emergence of a particular style? Like, does it happen every 10 years? Is there a period to it, or is it just a one-shot deal?
I think that because everybody can record in their house now,
Mm,
I think that that spread in the time
right.
has has kind of disappeared for the
Mm,
most part. I
mm,
think that you know, like what Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak are doing now, um, if it was 20 years ago, there'd be six other bands that would be trying to do exactly what,
interesting.
and three of them would be good at it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No,
you know?
that's a really good point. That is a
Mm.
really deep point. That's so that the whole communal aspect of it has sort of been replaced replaced by home recording, for lack of better
Yeah.
description.
And there's also the lack of the same type of club scene. The club scene was fertile.
Yeah.
And, you could go, there was a time, by the time I got around to being on Bleecker Street and going around the places,
Mm,
it had already changed. It
mm,
was more fertile than that before that, because that was before that. You could walk from club to club, and you could see Gordon Edwards in one club, Will
That's
Lee in
right.
another club, Anthony Jackson in another club.
That's right.
By the time I got to round and playing in those places, it was different cats. Will has made it through every era, though.
Yeah. It's
he's,
yes.
he has made it through. He's an international guy.
Yeah.
He's he's world renowned,
Yeah,
but he
yeah.
still plays local places, man.
And I mean, not for nothing, and this, I hope you don't mind me saying that, but so has Booker King.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's not forget, like, you're still here because I'm letting the audience know 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I went to the bitter end. I saw the band called Vice, which is the band basically that came out of the Corey Glover solo project. Let's call it that, and that's the same band that recorded the album that Booker was just talking about, Hymns, right?
mhm,
And they have not lost a single step. It was a great night of music. It was absolutely fantastic. I was elated being there. I definitely left 2 feet above the ground. And that's how good it felt. So for those watching, for those listening, whenever Vice is in your city, wherever you are, go check them out because it is worthwhile. All right. But I just wanted to point that out. I am aware that Will has gone through all of these changes.
mhm.
If Anthony were not, we're probably in better shape. I would Anthony Jackson, that is, I would imagine that he would be doing the same thing because up
Yes.
until not too long ago, he was still playing the 55 bar and
Yeah.
playing the bitter end and playing the iridium and
Mhm.
all over the place. So, who knows? Let's fingers crossed that, his health recovers. That would be really, really awesome, right?
Yeah.
So the one thing so we did talk about like Aretha, we talked about Donny
Yeah.
Hathaway. Give us a couple names in the other genres. Even though I understand that the idea of genres is kind of going the way of the dodo, but nevertheless, like, give us an idea of who you guys, or who all of the musicians or musicians you were around, who did you listen to?
Hmm. Everybody listened to Steely Dan.
Ah, okay. Check that
Might
out.
have might have ruined some people's music because of how complex they made things.
Okay.
Um, we listened to, like I said, we listened to jazz singers too.
All right. Okay.
We listened to jazz vocalists, and that could be anybody from Joe Williams
Yeah.
to somebody brand new.
Right.
Um, but we listened to them as well,
Right.
and every electric bass player listen to upright players. We all listen to Ron Carter. We
That's
all
true.
listen to Milt Hinton. We all
Yeah.
listen to Georgia Vivier. We all
Yes.
listen to those guys
Yeah. Yeah.
as well. So it was our pockets are way we played. Like, you get guys that play like typewriters now,
Right. Right.
and groove is about space and knowing what note fits that space.
Mm.
And there's a lot of guys that when you walk into a guitar center, they can play a lot of notes, and it doesn't matter what instrument, because you go to the NAMM show, there are drummers that are unbelievable,
Right.
but you tell them, play me a slow 12-bar blues, and the dude can't do it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah,
And
that is a problem. There's
mm,
no doubt about that because yeah, that is a problem. That is
mm,
I'm totally with you what that is concerned.
mm.
Um, go
But
ahead,
you
please.
said you said the genres. Joni Mitchell, we love.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Um, you know, I know personally there's always some rock
Mm.
in my stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm a big Beatles head,
Okay.
and um, Yeah, I'm a big Stones head as well.
Okay, okay.
And a big Hendrix head
Yeah,
as well.
of course.
And I like, a bunch of the harder stuff too,
Right, right,
you
right,
know. So if we take it, like 9 Inch Nails, which is more industrial sounding
right,
and stuff like that. And that goes to how sonically people hear things,
right, right.
you know. So that's about it.
No, no, I mean that's
Yeah.
that's plenty. That is plenty. That's what is important here, I think, is of course, the individual artists, so that's important, but then also the variety that is
Mhm.
in there. Plus, I'm so glad that you mentioned, players like Ron Carter, like Milt Hinton, like George Duvivier, because
Mm,
all of that kind of links it into and puts it into perspective in an historical sense as well, right?
mhm.
The scene out of which the aesthetic for Baduizm Live came was firmly rooted in all of those elements, right?
Oh yeah.
You have the exploration, you have the experimentation of whatever is hip at the time, but then you also have the understanding of what came before.
Sonically, those records, like what Baduizm and like D'Angelo and those guys, and even Bilal
Hmm.
and Matt as well, what those guys sounded like to me was, I said, boy, this sounds like if you added vocals, like R&B vocals, to a CTI recording.
Check that out.
You know,
Mm. Yeah, that's
yeah,
the
because there was that, it's undeniably fat, big
yeah,
and
yeah,
and you can hear everything.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a really good description, and that is man, Booker, you're dropping some wisdom to it. Because that's a serious, like I never put that together, but you're absolutely right. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right. CTI, for those who don't know, Creed Taylor, and I forgot what the I stands for. Maybe international.
International, I think it's Retail International, yeah.
Yeah, was a record producer and who had this label called CTI that put
Mhm.
out albums towards the like from. I mean, I'm sure that he started
Late
beginning of.
6 his stuff really was late 60s, early
There you
70s,
go.
all of that stuff, like stuff like Don Sebesky's Giant Box and
Yeah, yeah,
all of that, it really it infected a lot of other things the way, and he heard, the mixes of things.
right,
And what's funny about that is I think that, because you have to go back to see what's going to happen
right,
in the future. And you look at CTI and how jazz started being recorded,
right.
and you listen to how you started hearing bass on those records,
Yeah,
because Ron was louder than anything on those records,
yeah,
which was
yeah,
fine with me.
yeah.
Um, but you go back and you say, what other record label in the past or before that did that same thing, where
Mm,
all of a sudden you heard things in the rhythm section that you really didn't hear before that?
right.
And that's Motown,
Yeah, for
without
sure,
a doubt.
for sure. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
This, believe me, I'm going through it with Ain't Too Proud. There's not a week or not really a day that goes by where I don't have like a light bulb moment like
yeah,
that. Because Jameson's playing is so far ahead of everything, and at the same time writing the book while he's playing, writing the book on how it's supposed to be done, or how
yeah,
how we are the book that we all follow to this day.
yes,
And on top of that, you have recording, you have parts, you have the
mhm,
business part of it with Barry Gordy being the maverick that he was and is. So no, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. This CTI Motown, like that is a
yeah.
very very clear
Because if you listen
distinction.
to the aesthetic of the recording, you say,
Yeah,
wow, the bass is taking up a really big space in this.
yeah, yeah, for real, for
Mhm.
real,
And then you
for real.
started listening to the jazz recordings on other labels, and you started listening, and you say, wow, they're doing the same thing. Must be doing something right.
Right. Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, you could make you could draw the line saying that, okay, so you have this commercial success of an entity like Motown, right?
Mhm.
And jazz producers are like, okay, we're hip to that because the Motown musicians were all jazz musicians. That let's not forget that. Like they were serious bebop, hard bop,
That's right. They sure were.
you know. That's
Yeah.
where they were coming from. That's what they were doing most of the time. And so there was sort of an influence onto the jazz side of things. And they were like, okay, well, if we bring up the rhythm section, perhaps it'll speak to more people. You know,
Hmm.
it's entirely possible, and I think that you're totally on something there. Um, there's one thing that I wanted also to bring up with you is because I did see you back in the day with our mutual friend Celan, right? Um,
Hmm.
and I think Mike Zero was in that band at the
That's
time as
right. Sure
well,
was. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and your playing for me was always one of the examples of what I called the Brooklyn sound at the time, right?
Mhm.
So it was you, it was Ron Jenkins, and it was Carlos Henderson. Um,
Mhm.
you know, those kind of players where your lines seem to flawlessly and effortlessly go over the bar line, right? Like there was no,
Mhm.
that of course there was the repetitive motion
Yeah.
of a groove, like that was very very important and was definitely adhered to.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, if if you if you wanted to say something, you basically all of you stepped out and said, okay, here's a line, check this turnout, check
Mhm.
this turnaround out, right? I hear the
Mhm.
same thing in Hubert Eaves playing, for instance. That's
Yeah.
that's in my opinion very very similar aesthetics. And I was wondering, where did that come from, or is there
Mhm.
is there something that where it came from?
I know for me, it's coming from listening to players like Chuck Rainey and Willie Weeks and guys that kind of did that.
Okay,
And,
okay,
and they did it effortlessly, and we kind of made it our own in a different way.
right, right.
Because I'm not going to. The good thing is that we weren't looking to copy anybody. We were looking to
Mm,
play things that were ours. So, so when we were playing those things, like I know the worst thing you can ask me to do is to copy somebody's riffs.
mm, okay,
That's the worst thing you do. Can I play them? Yes. Can I
yeah,
play them flawlessly? Yes.
yeah,
But you're missing something if you're asking me to play something that's not mine.
right, 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 right.
Because you're going to get better if you ask me to play mine.
Of course, of course. It's
Yeah.
maybe it's a question also of basically taking on someone else's personality versus just being yourself.
Yeah. It's just like when you listen to when we were playing, we all had to kind of have our own signature on the thing.
Right, right,
So, um, it's like how you listen to, if you listen to Stanley Clark play upright, you listen to Ron Carter play upright, you know 2 notes in who it is.
right, right.
And the thing is with electric bass, that's harder to do.
Yeah, yeah,
So, because in a lot of times, how you're mixed, they're going to make you sound just like that last guy that was on stage.
right,
So,
right,
how you make that sound different is how you play over that line or what you do. And, sometimes you play with, like I did a lot of playing, Ron and I both did a lot of playing with Scooter.
right, right.
And Scooter was the dude that if, if you were going over the line, you better know what you're doing because he's following you.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
those watching, for those listening, we're talking about Scooter Warner, a great drummer who used to live here in New York, who I believe is now located in New Orleans. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's just fantastic. And listen, last but not least, um, I would be totally amiss if we didn't talk at least a little bit about equipment. So I mean, it's just there's probably a lot of bass players watching this or listening to this, so it is kind of important. I did bring that up with Hubert Eaves, you know, and he was like, "Well, I played an MTD at the time, and
Mm,
maybe a Galleon GK, you know, amp,
mhm,
and that was kind of it, right?" But give us a quick rundown of what you used back then. We're talking
mhm.
now 90s versus where you are now, sonically and equipment wise, because that would,
Okay.
I think, that'd be interesting.
There was a thing, you know, I went through, I've been around a long time. So I've had that acoustic
Mm.
370 amp with the folded
Yeah, yeah,
cabinet, it folded 15 in it. I've had an Ampeg, you know, 810 cabinet, SVT head.
right.
Um, but when I remember that the day I got a Harkey cabinet
Okay.
and GK 800 RB, I said my sound changed.
Mm. Okay.
And I said, ooh, because, you know, and there were a lot of guys at the same time using that SWR thing,
Right.
you know, and I never felt that they had enough oomph from
Okay.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also, like I said, again, I also played a lot of rock. So I had to have something that had those lower mids in it
Right.
that would cut through. You know, when you're playing with a guitar player with a 100-watt Marshall, you better be coming with something,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
you
For
know.
sure.
And then I went from that to um, I used a Mesa Boogie rig for
Okay.
a while. It was their first hybrid head, their first two preamp solid state amp.
Right.
And I had a couple of cabinets with a 610 cabinet with a tweeter in it,
Right.
and a 410 cabinet with a tweeter in it, and a 15 with nothing else in it.
Mm.
And I would use the 410 and the 15 together, or I'd use the 610,
Right. Right.
right? And that was actually a pretty wicked sounding rig because it was so different sounding than everything else that Mesa Boogie had.
Mm.
And one time, Ron Randall, I don't know, you know Ron Randall?
No.
Okay, Ron Randall, he said that he was the EBS guy in New York.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And Ron said to me, he says, you need to try an EBS rig, right? And I was like, sure. And so we're doing a Corey gig
Right.
very, very early on. And he set up a 410 cabinet, a 15 for me, and an EBS. Oh, what was the head at the time? I can't remember the name of the head
Mm.
at the time,
That's
but
okay.
it was their big head at the time.
Yeah.
And I set it up, and we got about 3 songs in, and I said, "Well, this is what I'm going to be playing for a while." And I
Mm.
stayed with them for a good long time.
Oh wow.
I stayed with them for about 10 years because really, when you start looking at what everybody was sounding like at that
Mm.
particular time, is the only one we could cross those lines and you didn't have to change amplifiers.
Right. Right.
Like you could play a hardcore gig with
Mm.
an EVS amp and a guy with an SVT be going like, what is that you're using?
Yeah.
They won't know,
Yeah.
you know, and how it's evolved. Well, now nobody wants to carry anything heavy.
Right.
You know, all those cabinets weighed 100 pounds.
Yeah.
So I remember I went to a NAM show and I met Thomas Ike,
Mm.
right? And at the time I was 100% an MTD guy. I had two MTDs. I had two 535s.
Right.
Um, And actually, when you met me, I was using MTDs, but I was using the Rendels and the Beasts at the
I
time.
thought so.
So
I thought so.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah, I used MTDs for a long time, and still my number two bass is an MTD.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was playing, in the booth, right,
Mm-hmm.
for my string company at the time, and Thomas was right behind us. And the guy who was the distributor, the U.S. distributor, said, um, Tom's needing a distributor in the US. So he said, well, I know, I'm hearing these guys play. I know what his bass sounds like.
Mm.
So early on Sunday morning, that last day of NAM,
Mm.
I went over there and I played. And I mean, the tech amp stuff, the the first Puma 1000 head in the United States belonged to me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because Gary Granger was with him before that, but
Right.
that first head belonged to me. And everywhere I played with that rig, everybody wanted to know what it was because they saw me walk in with it.
Yeah.
I'd have the cabinet in one hand, the head was on my shoulder, bass on my back, and
Yeah.
I'm like, they go, how much is that thing? And I'd go, you know, girls would go, oh, that speaker cabinet is not huge, right? And I go, pick it up. And I go, pick it up, right?
Right. Right.
And they go, and they'd laugh. And I said, I'm not kidding. Go pick it up.
Mm.
And they pick it up and they go, oh my God, is there anything even in here?
Yeah. 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 No, I get it.
And that
I get
was,
it.
you know, that was that. And I used them until, I say 4 years ago
Okay.
when I met Jeff Gensler
Okay.
from Gensler Amplification.
Yeah.
And he was over at Mas Hino's shop, the guitar shop, Labella's guitar shop
Right.
on 34th Street in Brooklyn.
Right.
And he had, one of his 210 cabinets. And it was brand new because he hadn't had that. He had other cabinets, but that was brand new. And it was, the thing that intrigued me was that it was 210s, and instead of a tweeter, it had 4 3-inch drivers.
Oh, check that out.
In the middle of it.
Yeah.
Now, when you saw me play with Corey,
yeah.
I was using 2 of those. Using 2 of those. And I used one of his 800-watt heads. The thing about that cabinet is that a tweeter, we all got used to hearing tweeters with bass, right? A tweeter dies before you pretty much get to the end of the stage. So the tweeter is for the guy playing the bass.
Yeah.
Nobody in the audience is really hearing that tweeter.
Damn. Yeah.
With those 3-inch drivers, everybody in the back of the room
is hearing it.
Your high hits and your highs. And I remember I was playing at Arthur's Tavern. You know what Arthur's, when it was open.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Gary Clark Jr. walked into the club. It was a Tuesday night.
Right.
The band was EJ, who was the leader of the band. Fred Elias was on drums, and Artie White played with Alicia Keys, was on guitar.
Right.
And that was mostly an old R&B blues kind of gig, right?
Right.
And we played some blues when he walked in, right? So he walked closer. He was in the back, and he walked closer to the stage. And Fred says, Gary, you want to play? So he came up on stage, and I said, how you doing? And he just turned to me and he says, what are you playing through? And I'm like going, a dude like that, that's not what he's supposed to know. because what he noticed was that he could hear everything in the back of the room.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Were we loud? Yes. But we were loud, but it was like the things that normally get lost didn't get lost with those cabinets. And it's fun because you have to get used to how they sound up front, because it doesn't sound like what a tweeter sounds like up front.
Of course. No, I totally get it. I totally get it. You're making a very, very good point. A couple things, and that is the importance of highs in the bass sound, like how important that really is, And then the other thing is also that the minute it gets loud, things get more difficult. And I think people I did another live video with, I don't know if you know Winston Roy, the bass player.
Yeah, I know Winston. Yeah.
Okay. So, and where we were talking about how to play rock, basically. And the minute, we came to both had the same feelings that the minute you play loud, like everything is amplified,
Yeah.
So the minute you touch the wrong string, that's amplified as well. We've all been there,
There's something that did happen in the late 80s, and it was something that Marcus Marcus Miller probably started unintentionally,
Mm.
and people ran with it, and that was the scooping the mids out.
Right. Right.
And the thing to me is that your sound and your personality lives in the mids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you scoop them out, you're scooping out everything that makes you sound like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
No, I get it. I get it. And he made that, he did that very intentionally because he wanted to
Mm.
separate himself from a Jaco sound.
Yeah.
At least from that's what I gather from interviews with him. Who
Well,
knows?
the thing is that everybody thought it was just scooping out the mids. It wasn't just that.
Right.
It
Right.
wasn't just that, because if you listen to his bass, especially by the time he got to the 90s,
Yeah.
what that bass particularly sounded like, there were a whole lot of grainy mids up in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for
Everybody
sure.
just thought, like when you looked at guys when they had that SWR head, right?
Yeah.
And you looked at that graphic EQ and it was like this.
Right. Right.
I was like going, well, you might sound good right where you're standing, but nobody can hear you in the middle of the room.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that's an important place where you have to project. There's
Mhm.
just no two ways about that. I totally get that, man. Booker, I cannot thank you enough for being here today, for making the time, for giving us your insight on the scene back in the day, and especially out of which this particular aesthetic came from. I thought. Again, like I'm so grateful to you that you spoke on that today, because as I said
Mhm.
before already, we are at an incredible opportunity. We have an incredible opportunity right now to talk about this particular album, and I'm sure that there are many others like it, but with people who were and who are still active, right? and
Yeah.
and it's not just a museum piece, not that there's anything wrong with that, but also showing like all the little details, all the little thoughts that, the minutia that went into the choice making and the aesthetic that produces something like that. One big item or topic of my live videos has been the fact that, especially with African American music, with R&B, with rock, with whatever the genre is, it's not just coming out of nowhere. Like it's a result of processes and thoughts and concepts, etc., etc. And exactly what you were speaking to today is the best example of that. So once again, man, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure, man.
Awesome, awesome. Well, listen, and I hope to. When are you back in town? What's your schedule like? Do you have any
Well,
gigs coming
it
up?
is, it is, it is, officially not the busy season anymore. So, so I'm, I'm back to doing like little things, little sessions at home
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
yeah,
But am I doing? Oh, and not this weekend, but next weekend. I think the 12th.
yeah.
It's called Elsie Rooftop. I'm doing a thing with my Arthur's Tavern compatriots. We're doing a Motown centric show.
Oh, check that out.
Yeah, we're doing
Elsie's Elsie's rooftop. All right, I'm
Elsie
sure.
Rooftop. It's on. I think it's on 40. It's in the 40s. It's on off of Broadway or on Broadway, something like that.
Got it, got it. People can
Yeah,
find it on social
yeah,
media.
yeah.
I will also link your social media sites to this video, to the YouTube video, so people can find you and check you out, because I think this needs to be explored. This needs to be. I'm a big fan of going out and listening to music. What can I say? So that's that's half of my
It was great
life.
seeing you that day too.
Yeah, and
And
seeing that Gene Perez was in the.
I know
I mean, are you
that's my
kidding me?
boy.
That's
It's so funny. I used to sub for him with Mary Wilson. Speaking of another Motown legend.
all coming
Yeah,
together, all coming
yeah.
together. Unbelievable. Yeah, no, that was a real treat seeing him, and we got to talk a little bit, and I took a picture with him, and it was just that means the world to me. I'm also trying to get him to do a live video with me, because I think people need to hear about him.
I could tell you, the thing that with Gene is that that thing when he, because he played with Willie Colon for ages,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you hear a lot of other guys that are playing salsa or Latin influenced music that are using their thumbs and things.
Right.
That's all Gene.
Yeah.
That's I will tell you that's where that came from. It's
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt
Mhm.
it. The dude is so heavy. So heavy.
And you hear him all the dance remixes. It's like I love it. It's because it's like, man, you get past the first 16 measures, it's genius.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a good friend of mine used to call him Genius Perez.
Genius Perez, man. It that
Genius Perez, and that's just
nah
what it is. It
that
really is.
yeah, for real. For real.
Mhm.
There's no doubt. So it was great seeing you the other night, and it was great seeing him in the audience, and as I said before already, in the audience, in the audience who's watching, who's listening to this, if anyone has a chance of checking out the band Vice, I highly recommend it, because they tore the roof off the bitter end that night. And it was just such a joy to listen to them. Um
And we're highly interactive because if you talk to us, we talk back.
exactly. That's true. That's, that's totally true. All right. Well, listen, Booker King, once again, thank you so much for being here today. And I hope to see you soon, man.
Okay, man.
All right. Later.
All right, then later.